Yeah, I actually went ahead and hit record, so we are looped in. But Dan, real quick, you got to explain that before we get into this interview. What do you mean by there's ranch time and then there's regular time? I mean, I kind of have an idea. I want to hear what you're thinking.
Well, when you like, it's kind of a guest ranch thing and just a ranch thing in general. Like, there's just so much reality to it and so much time together, and you're all living in bunkhouses, and like you get to know every aspect of the people you work with. Like, and it's kind of, you kind of think the rest of the world's like that too. But so many people, there's such a separation between their day-to-day work and they go their home life, their work life, and like ranching in general doesn't really have that. And then you cram everybody into like these seasonal ranch jobs and like the drama and all that stuff. Like, you just get to know people so well.
Yeah, it's a little bit like living on a submarine, huh? I think I might have told you that. I don't know if it's relatable to other people, but when I was at a guest ranch, I thought of it like Baywatch on dry land. And that's because I was watching the old Baywatch. I was kind of going through it while I was there because you have that time too, right? Like at night, you're just done with the day and you want to watch some show that takes your mind away. So I'm watching Baywatch and I'm like, man, this is what we do every day. We're like looking for danger. We're averting disaster. We're trying to be nice to people. We've got our drama. It's just that whole ecosystem. So yeah,
totally. And there's so
my
much
time at the guest ranch got equated to Baywatch.
Yes, you've hit it right on. There's so many comparisons to, like, you work at a ranch for, like, it's what you love to do. Like, you ride colts for zero money, you almost die every day. Like, you have no health insurance. Like, it's insane that anyone would do that other than they love it. And that's just how they want to live. And so, like, you end up, it is a little like Baywatch because it's totally like the passion of what you love doing and who you are. And like, it's never about the money.
Yeah. And that could be a big problem, right? We had a great episode recently, which may not be able to air due to technical difficulties, but we got into talking about the same thing where when you're doing something you love that much, then a big part of the reward is like who you are and what you do. And then you got to be careful because then there's that identity crisis too sometimes where you might want to be and do something you can't even do. And yeah, it's a very interesting life. Okay, that makes sense. But when you were saying ranch life and regular life, I think all three of us have a feel for what you were talking about. Well, but I know some of the listeners might go ranch life or regular life. What are you guys trying to segregate us into here?
No, I like your Baywatch comparison because it's like watching a TV show because it's like everything's right there. You don't miss anything. Yeah. Like there's no, like, everybody knows everything about what you're doing. And I get, like, the rest of the working world, it's so segmented. Like, people are entirely different people at work and at home, and like they put on different masks.
Yeah. The places I've worked that are like that, we've called it the snow globe effect.
Yes, totally.
Where it's like your whole life happens inside this little snow globe that, is the ranch or the barn or whatever it is, right?
Yes.
And it's just this little habitat. And for better or worse, people can't really see outside the little habitat, right?
Yes, totally.
Exactly. Yeah. The beginnings of tribal culture. Well, anyway, Dan, before we get way into the interview, I know I've done a little homework. I still don't know you that well. Joe's probably looked into you a little bit too. Like we talked on the phone, we try to have a little bit of a skeleton and then we'll just chat through it. But I know you kind of started out in your professional life as a cowboy all over the country. And then you kind of progressed from that to doing your own deal to this ranch vision achievement, that something you're doing right now. So I'm sure we'll get into that later on. But to start off, where are you originally from? Because there's Illinois. A lot of people that end up working all over the country, but it's nice. It's okay. Illinois. What part of Illinois?
Suburbs of Chicago, just typical small town America.
So you weren't born on a ranch. That answers our question already, right there. So what was home life for you growing up? What did your parents do?
My dad managed the family asphalt plant. It was a little bit like an episode of The Sopranos. Yeah. No, that was
So you
my
got a
whole
knack for
family.
drama early on then, huh?
Well, yeah, my whole family was in like the asphalt business. And like it was, yeah, so like growing up, it was just typical suburban America. I always laugh like, and you take any suburban town from Virginia to California, and like they all look the same. You could get drugged in one, drove for a week, dropped off in another one, and it's like the identical same place. Cookie cutter suburbia.
Yeah, totally agree.
And a lot of
Yeah.
that's really
Well,
changed.
then
Like
what took you from cookie cutter you know what, Dan? Our delay is longer than we thought, so we'll just be even more careful, and we can clean this up. No worries.
Got it. Stop talking so much, Dan. Make pauses.
No. Keep talking. Keep talking.
Yeah. So, anyways, I kind of, I don't know. I grew up playing in the woods behind our house. Behind our house was cornfields and swamps, and forests as far as you could see, and like it was like I never thought I'd say this, but like I don't think kids are the same now as they were when I grew up. Like it was a punishment when I was a kid to be inside. And like every waking moment you're outside playing baseball, playing guns in the woods, playing hide and go seek, capture the flag. Like you're just outside and it was a punishment to stay inside. And I remember when like Nintendo came out and like one kid had one and we'd like go play for an hour and I was like, all right, let's go back outside. I'm giving pauses because I don't know.
Yeah, it's yeah. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
sound great.
Okay. I was gonna say I was thinking about that the other day with like the video game and like everything that's accessible now inside for kids. And part of it is like I don't know. There's so much less empty space. Like as a kid, like I'm gonna play, right? Like then you just pop in a video game and it's so like defined for you, right? So one, if you're inside, you're probably gonna end up, frankly, like not being as tough, right? Like not skinning your knee as much and like things like that. But I think it's really interesting to see how a lot of people think. And like I work with people who are about 10 years older than me, like kind of high school, college age kids.
Yeah.
And I can tell the difference in the ones that like spent a lot of time outside growing up and the ones that maybe like played a lot of video games or did something. And it's like the ones that played a lot of video games, it's not that they're not smart or anything like that, but that definitely they approach things differently, right? Because it's not like, oh, you just walk into the backyard and there's this blank canvas, like how are you going to fill time? It's like how you're going to fill time is very defined for you already.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like when they started talking about careers and stuff, like I wanted to be Indiana Jones. Like I legit thought that was a career that you could go do.
Heck yeah.
And I kind of didn't really think about it till now, but like I totally ended up like Indy. Carried a whip and a 6-shooter and like I totally made it happen. And I didn't really occur to me at the time.
Mm.
So how do you go from suburbs of Chicago to living life on ranch time?
So my parents
Is that,
semi-retired.
Is that somebody's
Yeah.
phone?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. That's me. I'm in somebody's office here. So just hold right where you're at. Hold that thought. And let me just check this. Okay, that's weird. Someone's laptop in here started ringing. I think they've got an Apple thing. I'm going to put a Joe, it's that little thing right next to the time symbol, right, for marking.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to put a mark here to edit that. We're just being really careful now, Dan, after what I was telling you about us screwing up our podcast the other day. Okay, everybody says the recording looks good. All right, right back where you were, and we'll edit that.
Yeah, I went to Florida. My parents semi-retired down there to Sarasota, which is kind of big horse country. So I went to community college there, and then
Cool.
there was a big dressage barn that was near our house, and I worked there for 2-3 years, and that kind of started the whole horse thing. Yeah, it was kind of dressage and polo was a big thing in Florida.
But you didn't, you somehow ended up in, I guess, the Western world. You didn't feel like dressage was your calling?
The horse thing totally was. The horse thing totally was.
Yeah.
And that really, and that kind of led me, like, I don't know, everybody, you're 20 years old, you're just trying to figure out what the hell to do with your life, and I kind of love adventure, so then I wanted to go. I was about 2 inches away from just dropping everything and moving to Alaska with a good buddy of mine, and he still gives me crap about that today. Like, we should have went to Alaska. You wrecked my life. But I ended up going to college at Colorado State, and then I started working on guest ranches. Took a class in college that had like just enough credits to where I could take an upper level class that went around to, at that time, like, regenerative ranching wasn't really a term, and holistic really wasn't either, but that's what it was. It was a tour to a bunch of different ranches like Deseret and like a few others in Wyoming and Montana and Utah that was kind of like this conservation ag thing, which I had no idea even existed. I went on that tour, and I came back home, and I quit college, and I went to work on ranches, and it's just been totally, like, found what I wanted to do and never looked back. Studied wildlife biology, studied art, studied range. Like, I took enough classes, and I was like, this is shit. Like, this is just to work for the government and do. I get excited and I swear. Sorry, some of your audience probably doesn't appreciate that. I'll try to keep it to them. But the whole, like, ranching thing, like conservation and regenerative and holistic management, was like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do.
So, I guess, and maybe I don't have the timeline exactly right. Like, if you're saying I want to do the regenerative stuff and holistic management, that whole line, I guess, was guest ranches just like where you were going to start with that? Because that's almost like
liked horses.
Nothing against guest ranches, but that's almost in like the tourism sector, not the agricultural sector,
Yeah, well, what really led me to the guest ranch thing was, like, I was just barely kind of knew who Buck Brannaman was and Ray Hunt and Brian Newbert. Like, I kind of just barely knew who they were in Florida, and that ranch is called the Home Ranch. It was in Steamboat Springs. And that they would host clinicians. There'd be like, I think we must have had like 10 different clinicians come through that ranch every year. And so like partly what they would do is like guest ranch stuff, just typical dude ride kind of things, and then all these clinics.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like, I just thought that was the coolest opportunity. I had to be there, you know, like, and that, like, I got to spend weeks with all those guys. Got to start colts with all of them, and then
Cool.
the college thing is really that
Yeah, that
college
sounds
tour
like a perfect opportunity.
what put the two together. And then it was like, I just started finding out about ranches that were into the land management, into the stockmanship, into the horses, and I would just go. Like, some of them worked out, some of them didn't.
Dan, did you ever make it over to the Sea Lazy U back when that was kind of in its heyday?
A lot, you know, yeah. So when I was, a lot of those ranches, like everybody kind of worked in the same circles. That was like career dude ranch wranglers. Like they'd start colts in the winter, and then they'd go work on places like Home Ranch or Sea Lazy U or McGinnis Meadows. Like I got a lot of friends kind of were in and out of those places. So I never worked there, but I had like 10 different friends that were there. It was.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that place just kind of, someone would probably laugh if I said it kind of impressed me, because maybe they've seen a lot bigger guest ranches than that. But I was visiting Leaf and Laura up there on our way through Colorado, and I was kind of like impressed with the amount of horses they had. I know it's scaled way down, but I was like, man, I would not want to be the manager of this guest ranch. Like, imagine being the head wrangler at that place, and Leaf was giving me all these old stories and stuff, and we had a really good time visiting there. But to be bringing in like 200 horses every morning and saddling all those horses and trying to keep an eye on all that, and having 25, 30 wranglers at a time. And I can't imagine the drama. The most wranglers I ever worked with was about 6. And I thought that was a lot. And so that just blew me away. The idea of managing, 30 wranglers and 250 head of horses, and just attack, and just all the logistics with a place like that. So compared to the Sea Lazy U, when they were operating like that, how big was the place you were at?
I ended up working, I kind of followed the like working ranch, guest ranch thing for quite a few years. I did that for like 10 years, primarily because I just enjoyed all those horses. I just, like, it was like, I would be horseback from 6 a.m, jingling stuff in, and then I'd get done with work wrangling dudes. Then I'd go start colts. And like, I couldn't have thought of any better life. I was like, I'm just going to do this forever. You get to know so many horses, like, and then like when you go out to do the cattle work, like it's funny because you get like probably as close as to this idealistic version of cattle ranching that everyone thinks is going on, to where like it's these happy cattle drives and everything's like, it's just cool.
Like City Slickers, right? I remember watching City
totally
Slickers
is.
when I was like 13, and I was already angling towards being a cowboy at that time, and watching that movie, and just the nostalgia. Like, I'm not old enough to remember like the late 80s, early 90s, but just like the whole movie, I'm like, wow, this is awesome. And you can go out west and drive cattle across 3 states, and
Yeah.
big wake up call when I worked for the first ranch I worked for. But it was a cool movie.
Yeah.
And a lot of others like it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I really enjoyed doing that. I did that for quite a few years, and then after a while, like, you kind of, I don't know, that point in life, like, I kind of just got sick of the dudes. Now I would do it again, but
And so how, because I don't know exactly what you do now, but somehow you got from, well, how long did the, I guess, dude ranch era last? That's my first question.
Yeah, let's see. We did that. So I ended up on a. I met my now wife at the hideout at Flitner Ranch in Shell, Wyoming, which is a couple 100,000-acre cattle ranch, and they had a guest operation on it. And I met her there. She was big, long story, but yeah, we ended up. Then she went to Hawaii to work at our guest ranch, and then I ended up starting colts in Oregon for a winter, and then she left Hawaii and went there with me and got done starting those colts, and then we went to McGinnis Meadows. Like, we just loaded up my little piece of crap Jeep Wrangler and drove to McGinnis. First we went to we just kind of drove around for like 2 months, and then we ended up in McGinnis, and then she ended up working there for 3 years. I ended up working there for a couple years. Lots of drama. And then kind of like the thing with the ranches, it's so much of it's seasonal. Like, my resume looks like crap because, like, and you go to work on other ranches and they're like, what is wrong with you? And it's like, you start colts for 6 months, they're done. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And then we ended up
you're constantly on the move.
Yes. We ended up managing a ranch in DuBois, Wyoming. I always wanted to ranch in my dream was I wanted to kind of ranch in balance with nature, right in the middle of bears and wolves and wild Wyoming. No fences. So we ended up managing a ranch right on the edge of Yellowstone National Park. And that was kind of like the settling down phase.
So this was after McGinnis.
Yeah, like 3 or 4 ranches in between. Colorado, Wyoming.
Gotcha. So before you go too far, though, because you were chuckling about it too. You were talking about going to McGinnis and the drama. We don't have to dig deep into McGinnis or anything. I know there's some great hands that have come out of there. But but can you just talk a little bit about, like, what was your attraction to McGinnis besides it obviously being like the Brannaman style horsemanship and I'm sure horses? You said you liked to get around the horses. Was that something you had your eye on doing for quite a while?
Yeah, I think that first summer I got to spend a lot of time with Ray Hunt, and who's the other guy? Totally. God, I'm totally drawing a blank. Who's the guy who has a big horse sale in Thermopolis? Bill Smith. Famous bucking horse guy. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Yeah. So Bill Smith, spent a lot of time there.
Heard the name.
Yeah, I got to spend a lot of time with them. Buck kind of avoided the place. He wouldn't do a clinic there. They always wanted him to. He would do a clinic in town that we would go to. And I just wanted to spend more and more time around that. Like, I just kind of wanted more of that. So McGinnis, like, I kind of knew. I think what the draw to McGinnis is there was a Western Horseman article about them. And then I wanted to go there.
Because I've known a few people. I've had several friends who had like a real goal of working there. You know, I think between the horsemanship and, you know, the idea, you know, anytime you want to do something, especially something kind of niche, you start to find a place that does the thing you want to do. But then it's also important to find a place that's kind of cool inside of that genre. And then a place where you hope or you assume that you're going to meet friends and make connections, and it's going to be kind of a leg up to the next place. So
Yeah.
did you feel like, was the drama worth it to be there? Did you feel like it paid off to be there?
I mean, that's kind of what I do now. That's kind of what I do now is like I realize any kind of growth like is a balance of drama. Like it's just a part of life. Like you either have a negative version or a positive version of it. Like it's happening regardless. And it's just whether or not we acknowledge it and think about it and talk about it or act like it's not happening. And so whether it was McGinnis or every other ranch, like I've worked for some big corporate ranches. I've worked for family ranches. I've worked for somewhere in between. I've worked for conservation organizations. Like digging in and embracing the drama is the secret to things really going well. Is like just own it and like make it comfortable, and we can have difficult conversations and arguments and fights, and it's a good thing. Like we're just people.
Yeah. Well, if you're gonna go anywhere, like if you're gonna move, there's gonna be friction. Just is what it is. That's like a basic law of the universe, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any kind of movement or growth. Yeah, totally.
So you were saying you ended up managing this place. Were you managing it for someone else, or were you managing it kind of for yourself? Were you like the one calling the shots and had the reasons for why you were calling the shots?
Yeah, like a lot of ranches. I mean, it's kind of the typical, somebody buys 2,000, 3,000 acres is like a hobby ranch, and like got 200 or 300 cows. Like majority of ranches across the West, that's what it was. And we had a big giant grazing lease on National Forest, which was like heaven on earth to me. And so it was just me and my wife that kind of did everything. I think we had like 200 cows. So it was, it was a lot of fun. We learned so much.
Yeah.
So I know this is a can of worms, and not in a bad way, but there's just a lot of detail to it. But for you to get onto the kind of the regenerative side of things, what point in time was this when you started managing the ranches, and what was did you have kind of like a guiding philosophy, like in terms of your grazing and your management and stuff? Was there maybe a book or a person or a philosophy that was kind of what you tried to stick to in the beginning? Because I'm always really curious about that. We actually, here at my place, we do more and more regenerative stuff all the time. So I'm just curious kind of where that started for you when you got your chance to be a manager.
Yeah, like a lot of the regenerative stuff really started, I have to think back. It really started in college. Like I had no idea until I had taken a few college courses, and like I don't even think they called it regenerative. I think they just kind of, there was one ranch. There's a guy, his name's Tony Momberg, and he's he's kind of big into holistic management and Alan Savory's crowd. And like, he really was a guy that I met, and I'm like, I want to be like this dude. This guy, the way he thinks, the way he solves problems, the way he sees the world, like this guy's incredible. And so that's why we ended up in Wyoming. Is I called him and I was like, dude, you don't have any idea who I met you on like a college tour. Like, how do I get into this? And he put me in touch with that ranch, and he said, well, I think like they'd kind of let you do whatever you want. Like they don't really care if it's regenerative or holistic or whatever. But like you could do whatever you want there and dig into this. And I really love wolves and wildlife and bears, and it was just a no-brainer. And it was total blank slate to just try whatever I wanted. So we managed that ranch for about 2 or 3 years.
Gotcha.
And then we ended up, there was about 10,000 acres between us and the park. Well, it was us, this 10,000 acres, big chunk of national forest, and then Yellowstone. And nobody wanted that lease because it was so full of grizzlies, and wolves. Like, it had the reputation that we could do an entire podcast on this ranch. This ranch was cool because, like, they had this reputation. Like, if any trespasser was on the ranch, they'd shoot them. And it gets even more interesting.
Oh, jeez.
It gets even more interesting than that. So then we leased the grazing on that, and we bought like 400 or 500 yearlings, and then there was another 400 or 500 head of like custom grazing cattle, neighbor cattle, and we kind of managed that whole property, and we spent all summer horseback, lived in our horse trailer. We did a bunch of stuff, stockmanship and electric fence, trying to keep the cattle clumped together and to where they wouldn't get killed by the bears and wolves. And we bought the most wild horn cattle you could ever imagine. We couldn't even keep them you'd put them in a corral, they'd all jump over the side. When we went to brand them, we tried to get them in a chute, they jump out the top of the chute. And I thought I was a good stockman until we got those cattle.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can tell us about it later, but I'm really curious about what it was like having to shoot trespassers and kind of how that went. But don't feel obligated to talk about that here.
So that ranch, like, this was really at a time to where, like, people didn't respect landowners like they do now. Like, this has changed in the last 10 to 15 years. Like, if you wanted to hunt on someone's place, you backed up with your pickup to their fence brace, threw a chain on the gate, ripped it out, drove out there and killed an elk. And, like, they had enough of it. And it was like one click away from being my own personal Yellowstone out there, like the TV show.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't realize that. Yeah, that would definitely start to prompt some shooting, I think. That sort of behavior.
Can you talk more about how you manage those cattle with that heavy predator threat, though? Because that to me, I think I would absolutely love that job where you're just, like you said, you're horseback all the time, and it's a very I don't know if it's like management heavy is the right word, but you're very adjacent to your herd all the time.
Yeah.
Right. When you're managing in that kind of scenario, it seems like. And I think I would really enjoy that, because that's probably the thing I enjoy about ranching the most, is being around big groups of cattle and seeing how, just kind of like watching everything unfold.
That was probably the biggest lesson in stockmanship. I continually learn and think back on those experiences. Like, we had the laziest bunch of dumbass Black Angus purebred cows that were just brain dead, and no one had ever asked anything of these cattle. Like they just would stand there and wait for you to bring a bale of hay, and that's just how they were just purebred cattle. Like, they're one click away from being show cows. And so, like, starting with them, like, I thought I was a good stockman, and you end up screaming at your top of your lungs trying to beat them up the top of a mountain. Like, it doesn't work. You just have to step back one day and go, like, what am I doing? What am I missing? Like, you don't realize how much those cattle are stressed, as dull as they are. and you're like, oh, we need cows, that rangy cows that'll run up the hill. Like if you do that with stress, you get just as negative as a result. And it was absolutely eye-opening how much at that time, like, I thought I was a good stockman, but everything I did basically revolved around just making the cows go places and getting good at making them go places. And as years gone by, like I realized at the time, like we started to get onto it, we started to understand the more though, when you show up and those cattle see you as any leader within the herd, and they trust you to go places with them, and they trust where you put them, and they trust how you move them. Like it took us a long time to really realize that, because like everybody around us was like, oh, you just need a stock dog. You just got it. You need a dog that'll climb up on their back and bite them and make them go. And like all the stockmen I was around, like, I mean, they're just hard ass. Like they could just get any cow to go anywhere, sort how they want. Like it was all about using enough force to get cattle to do what you want. And the whole time thinking you're being soft and you're being like respectful to the cattle. And like we really started to realize like it wouldn't work. If you beat those cows up the mountain, and like between the wolves and how you moved them, like you'd wake up the next morning and they're 10 miles back where you started. I was talking about, I thought I'd give it a break.
Yeah, go on.
So like I still reflect back on that and like, man, I should have tried that. And a lot of our wins came from like, we started to realize, like on one hand, we wanted those wild cattle because we knew we needed more confidence in the cattle, because if the cattle are confident and turn and face the predators don't have the confidence to approach and take them out. They just don't. They're like, they chicken out and they go find something easier. And we kind of figured that out. Like we would group the cattle every night. We'd put them in like a 10 or 20 acre electric fence pen. And we'd let them out during the day, and we'd notice they'd kind of drift out nice and quiet. They'd go graze, they'd stay together. And then we'd go gather them up in the evening and put them in these, what we call a night lot. And we would do that for like 3 or 4 days. And then like we could stop. And then the cattle would stay grouped up and placed for like a week or two. Wherever we would kind of lead them to or let them drift to, they would kind of be content and they'd stay there. And then they'd start splitting off into little groups. And like these were all cattle from different herds. And they would, and then we'd have to do the electric fence thing again to group them back up. And there was 0 fences between us and a highway in Yellowstone. And so like that was our whole strategy, is being able to place these cattle to where they were comfortable and they'd stay. We'd put them on water, they'd go up to graze, and then they'd go back down to water, and like it would really work. And we really didn't have any troubles with the bears and wolves until like we wouldn't show up for a couple of weeks. And the bears and wolves like knew it. And it was always like the fattest bull calf that a bear would kill, and then the wolves would eat it, and then the bears want another one because the wolves ate it.
Daggone.
Wow. Did you ever have any close encounters with grizzlies up there personally?
Totally. We had what was really cool is like I got so much respect for those bears, because like they are you can't believe how smart they are. We had like our little horse trailer camp that we lived in, and there was a hill on the edge of it. And we hadn't really gone up that hill for a few weeks, and we went up there, and there's like, you could see like a little nest where that bear would sit and just watch our camp. And like we never mess with anything. Our horses were in a little temporary fence pen, or cattle were right there. It wouldn't bother a thing. Would just look at us.
Maybe scouting out the enemy, I think.
You know,
Is
the
that not a
cattle
little
really
eerie feeling that happened to you?
totally. There's definitely a sixth sense when you're riding through the woods and there's a mountain lion or a grizzly or a wolf watching you. There's a sixth sense, like you can just the woods goes quiet and like you're just like, oh shit, something's watching us.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting how you took a pretty holistic approach to this, though, because, you know, you see the same thing in other areas. Like if someone's going to work with horses and if they're really heavy handed, you can be a really tough guy, but you'll never quite get anything done. You'll never have a good day. The horses will always kind of beat you, even if you're trying to beat them. So I'm sure it's the same with that. Like if maybe some really tough guy could go out there and try to push cows up in the hills and fight the grizzlies and be there and stay there and all that, but it would probably never work that well. So they just don't go there, or you kill all the grizzlies. But this, what you're talking about, sounds kind of cool. Like you're there and you're recognizing the intelligence of these apex predators. So you're just working with them. You're getting different cattle. You're doing things a little bit different because they're there and you're there, and they're smart enough to not get killed or run out of there. And they recognize that they can live with you in the same way you can live with them. That's kind of what I'm picking up from this.
Totally. A lot of the neighbors and stuff, like those cattle, like everybody was always trying to force the cattle to go up the mountain, force the cows to go stay in the Forest Service lease. And we had one neighbor, like every morning he'd go out there with his bullwhip and he'd beat the living crap out of the cows to try to get them out of the creek bottoms and go back up the hill. And the next morning, all the cows would come back down to the creek bottom and he'd do it again. So then he'd go get meaner dogs, go get more neighbors, go get more guys to scream and yell and bullwhips. And at the time, like I knew, like, God, there's got to be a better way. Like, why? And like at that, like our cows really wouldn't do that. Our cows would kind of stay settled. They'd stay where we'd put them. They'd kind of graze the hills. They really wouldn't hang out in the riparian areas. I didn't really know why, but like now that I've gotten more and more into the stockmanship with like Whit Hibbard and Steve Coate and a bunch of others, like if those cows are comfortable, they don't want to hang in the riparian areas. They go down to get a drink and then they drift back up into the hills and graze to get up where it's cool. The higher protein grasses are up on the hills. And like the cattle, like people just think like cattle are what we teach them. They're just trying to get by. And like at the time, like we were just barely on the edge of that to where we just barely understood what we were doing. I'd love to try it again now because I think the more confidence you build in the cattle, the more like the predators, like they don't really want to mess with them. Like that's not their usual food source. It's a risk. Like for any predator, like when they even go to kill an elk or a bison or whatever it is, they're looking at what's the risk and what's the reward. And if you're looking like those cows, you know what they are. You know, like they're kind of foreign. They're kind of act different. They smell different. Those predators, like they kind of pick up on like, this might not be the best deal for me. I get all jacked up about bears and wolves. Maybe there's other stuff.
Yeah, they kind of do that calculated risk deal, right? Where it's just the juice is no longer worth the squeeze.
Yes.
If the cattle look confident enough, as you put it. You know, it's funny you're saying all this. We had Andrea and Scott Van Leuven on here, and they manage the Sea Punch Ranch in Nevada. And it just cracked me up at the time, and I tend to agree with them, but you kind of alluded to it too. Scott very definitively on our podcast said that the introduction of Angus cattle was the death of stockmanship in the West. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Please expand. And boy, did he. And it was very, very similar sentiments to what you said. He was like, they're kind of sitting around waiting for the tractor to come by.
Yeah, I think like now I have a different approach. Like I kind of realize now that like you really have to start with what is the problem you're trying to solve in the market. And this is going to go a little different direction, but if the problem you're trying to solve in the market, if you're trying to capture a certain premium for a certain age class of cow or whatever it is, like you have to start with what your market wants and then back up. Like I was totally at a point in my life to where like I wanted crazier wild cows and be a stockman and a cowboy and rope stuff, and like now I've kind of leveled out to where like I realize to like you just kind of have to take with what you got and be a good stockman either way. If you've got dopey purebred cows and that's what the ranch owner or that's what the market is, then like spending your whole day bitching about what crappy cows they are. I've done this, guys. Like I've been that guy. Like I'm quit. These cows suck. Like it doesn't do you any good. It doesn't like you're just turning into an egotistical snob. And I've been that guy.
So I know at some point, I think you got into like direct market beef sales. Is that right? So if that's correct, did you do that at this ranch that you've been talking about, or is this this kind of like the next place down the line?
Yeah. So we had those cattle that we own, those horn cows. You could get them pretty cheap. They were inexpensive. And so like we always kind of enjoyed like this connecting a business to the public. Like we wanted this, like that's what we enjoyed about the guest ranch stuff, is just sharing the experience of the ranch and the West with people. And that kind of led us to like, well, we really had to try selling beef. And that was the next chapter of our next 10 years, 15 years almost, to where we went hardcore into that. What we would do is we'd spend all winter trying to sell beef to restaurants and ship it all over the country. We would drive down to Colorado most of the winter, and then we'd go back up to Wyoming during the summer. We kind of thought we needed to get this whole business moved down to Colorado and like a little hub location to where we could sell to restaurants and kind of build this connection to the home consumer, which was kind of inspired like everyone else, like Joel Salatin, White Oak Pastures and stuff like that. And that whole journey is another whole podcast episode in itself. We went pretty hard into that. And we no longer do that. And now we're shifting to other stuff.
Yeah. So what was it about that I guess we could kind of go either way. If it sounds like that's a pretty big topic, but let's start with this. What was it about that you kind of, that it got your wheels turning to do the next thing? Because you seem like the kind of guy that I don't know how to put it exactly, but you definitely seem like the kind of guy that is always doing what he's doing well to the best of his ability, but you're always thinking about what's next, you know? So what was, what caused you to then, move on to something after that? Is that right? Are you the kind of guy that kind of thinks about what's next and you want to build things, but you kind of want to build something else eventually?
Yeah. So this really, the meats thing, I have to remind myself, we're always where we need to be at the time. We're always right where we need to be at the time. And like, I didn't realize that when we started selling meat, we were super naive to business. Like we were just totally clueless. We ended up going through ranching for profit. We were in that for a couple years, and then we joined a bunch of other business development programs over the years. And that really, ended up getting, like, no doubt, probably $1 million education in business and entrepreneurism and finance. Like, we learned the hard way. And as the deeper we got into it and the more we learned about scaling the meats business, like, it just became something that, like, at the end of the day, we went in it because we were ranchers and we wanted to push a product into the market. We really didn't understand that that's horrible business. Like, good business is understanding the need in the market and what is your unique ability as a business owner to fill that. And we did not get that. And we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to push this story of good beef and good land management into the market. And we're always pissed off that people didn't get it. And, like, it just keeps getting more and more complicated from there. In a lot of ways, beef, like, a ranch doesn't have beef. It has cows and grass. Having beef is an entirely different product. And, like, the end consumer wants, like, they want you to solve their problem. They don't want to solve your problem. Their problem is they want good food, and they want, like, it for, like, beef, unfortunately, has a price ceiling. It has a comparison that no matter what it is, people are comparing it to something else. And, like, after a while, it just, by the time you look at it, like, we've kind of been taught in agriculture, like, this vertically integrated thing is just how you do business. And it's just like, it's like, who does that well is Walmart. And, like, Walmart, if they want to carry beef on the shelf, they don't go buy a ranch. They go buy beef. They don't, like, this, if you have to own every aspect of the supply chain to get a product into the market, like, you're toast. Like, you can do, like, 20 or 30 head and, like, convince yourself you're going to make a little money on the side. But all of those jobs in the marketing and the customer service and figuring out the margins and managing the slaughter relationships, like, all that takes time, attention, and focus. And, like, a lot of ranchers, like, we're used to, like, not, like, we're going to do 50 different jobs to make one profitable rather than one job that's profitable with focus. And that's totally what we did.
Well, let me ask you this then, because I really think that's a very interesting take. I'd say I tend to agree with you. But then how do you feel? You just mentioned guys like Joel Salatin and, like, White Oak Pastures. I'm more familiar with Joel Salatin, where he's just down the road from where I live.
Oh, yeah, cool.
And so, yeah, so my like, knowledge of him is, he's not Walmart, but he definitely controls like, he's fairly vertically integrated from what I can tell compared to most people, right? Like, you can, and you probably know more, I'm sure, but, like, you can get, like, an end product from him, but then he also, like, does all the stuff, and then, pile on top of that, like, the education and all his other revenues. But so it's like, it can be done. Like, there are people who have done it successfully, but I also know a ton of people who have kind of gone through what you're describing, where it's like, you're going to go take over the world, you're going to, like, do this top to bottom, and it's like, you end up just with, like, these 17 plates, and you have to spin them all at once. And they're like, but I'm good at spinning, like, these 3 plates. Right. Why can't I spin these 3 plates?
I think
So, like, what do you think the difference is? Because would you think it's fair to say there are people that, like, are vertically integrated, and then, it looks great, like, when you see their marketing, like, wow, that looks great, I should do that, but then it doesn't work out for people. So what do you think the difference is?
Well, so we all end up comparing ourselves to what other people are doing, like, and we don't really realize how much we do it. And like everybody sees the Facebook version of what Joel Salatin's business is. And for them, what fits their values, ethics, and morals is not the same for everyone else. Like you have this, and so like for some people, having that, like they see this image of what white oak is or polyface is, and they see something that looks fulfilling to them. And for some people it can be. And the reality is that like you've just entered a low margin, complicated business. If that makes you happy at the end of the day and you enjoy doing it, then maybe you're in the right spot. For me, what I realized was I was doing 50 different jobs for like $7 an hour if I was lucky. And like my focus was in too many different places. The problem I was solving in the market wasn't what I thought it was. The life that I would wake up to every day wasn't what I wanted. And the more we got into these entrepreneurial and business growth programs, the more I would experience people that were doing absolutely awesome things with their business and with a tremendous amount of focus. And they were making huge amounts of money and growing their business and solving awesome problems in the world. And that was, to me, like watching how they were doing it, like was way more appealing to me, to like, what can I do that will give me focus? I'm doing exactly what's in my superpower. And like, I wake up every morning and like, I can't believe I get paid to do this. This is exactly who I need to be in the world. And the meats business, like more and more, like I owned an e-commerce thing, and like to grow it, we needed to be good at, like it really had everything to do with being good at tech, finances, and like marketing is too broad of a term. But like the problem we were solving in the market was just beef. It was just, how do you get more beef leveraged into the market? Like I was way more fascinated by the story, by what we were doing on the landscape, the people, the drama, like all of the stuff. The ranching is really what excited me. And like, I like to solve big problems. And like, I read stuff that's going on with conservation and ranching around the world, and I have to be in the middle of it. That's why I needed to be in Yellowstone. I needed to know how to ranch and balance with bears and wolves. Like I couldn't not figure that out. I had to be in the middle of that. And so like we had to move on to other stuff. And like a lot of the things that I'm working on now, like I want to help a lot of people. I want to make a lot of difference in the world. And that takes focus. That I'm not going to be able to do that by owning everything from raw material to trucking company to shipping. Like it's too many things, and it's too low of a margin, and it doesn't allow me to make the impact in the world that I want to.
Yeah.
I could go on.
Yeah.
Well, can I ask you this, Dan? Can I ask you this? Because you and I have chatted a little bit. I think similar to you sometimes. And obviously I'm at a different stage in my life. And I know there's other people. There's probably people in the middle of that, and their life is different, but it could be compared to your beef business that you just described, where they're trying to spin the plates. And then there's a lot of other people that they want to do something, but they're not nearly as organized in their thought pattern. They're not describing the second Dan who's like, I need to be doing this, so I'm going to go pursue that. No, they just want to be doing something, and they want to be making some money. So they're kind of like, what do I do? What do I do? And so they're probably apt to take whatever they're doing right now and try to turn that into whatever they think they should be doing. And maybe they shouldn't do that. And that's why I wanted to ask you this. Where was your mind at going into the beef business? Because it's kind of a no-brainer why you wanted to manage a ranch. That's kind of the next step. Even doing the stuff with the grizzlies or running different cattle, like that's just kind of a more complicated version of a cowboy. It's just the next step up. I totally get that. But the whole starting a business, and especially using the internet and trying to push a product, and like that is a new life. That takes some thought. That takes a desire. Where was your mind at? Was it make money? Was it sell beef? Might have been a few things, but I'm really curious, like even how cognitive you were of what you were doing at the time, but most of all, just kind of what was your thought and what propelled you to do that?
I found like there's a few evolutions of and seasons of life I think we all go through. And like, I think the best way to describe what you're asking is like, there's drifting, driven, and design. And like that, a lot of my life, like I just like had a lot of interest. I had a lot of wonder. I had a lot of invention. I had a lot of, I want to fix everything. And I was totally drifting from one thing to another, and I was totally driven. I was driven and I was drifting. And like, I've just something cool I wanted to do. I went after it with everything I had. And then like, I would just kind of lose interest. And then something else was sexy and more shiny. And it wasn't until like going through all the stuff with the meats business that I really started to understand what it is to step back and understand, like, this is going to sound like cliche, but like figure out who you are, how you're wired, how your brain works, how you solve problems. Like, what am I good at? And like it really get to know yourself, and you can step back and really design your life, your future, like, and knowing full well, like it changes. And it should change. Like what you thought was cool one year, like next year, if you're over it, like we're taught to think like, oh, you're a bad person now. You didn't stay with it. Like to some degree, yes. And another degree, like, no, like design your life, design to like continually grow and evolve and learn. Like it really took me a lot of years to really understand that. And I'm still understanding that.
Well, so I've been thinking about this quite a bit lately, in terms of running my business and life in general. And I feel like it kind of goes back to what you were saying about those people you met that were growing their business and had margin and were making money. Everyone I've ever talked to that I've wanted to emulate or be like in terms of business or setting your life up, or just kind of all in that same vein, they do everything with such intentionality. They have so much intentionality about their life, and because of that, it feels like they don't drift like you're talking about. Like I heard one person say once that a business, for example, a business is more defined by what it says no to than what it says yes to.
Totally.
Right? Because that says a lot about what your intentionality is. It's like, no, we're here to do this, and I want to do this, and this is how I've laid out how to get to that path. And that might change.
Yep. And should
the path
change.
Could change, but we've always got a heading. Yes. Yeah. But we've got a heading, and I don't make decisions without considering that heading. And for me, like, that's what I mean by that intentionality. Yeah. And so I'd say like the last 6 months or so, I've really tried to dial that in to become as intentional as possible, because you're only one person. You only got 24 hours. Like you only have so many resources to allocate towards something. So if you're gonna do anything, like I'm kind of like you, like I like things that are simple, especially in business. It's like, this is simple. I know I'm going to make money through doing this. Things that are overly complicated with low margins, it's like, yeah, we could spin all 17 plates, but holy crap, like I think I could just spin these 3 really, really fast, and I would be a lot better at that. And that person, to me, has just so much intentionality, and it's why they succeed most of the time. Yeah,
I think so. One thing that's probably important to clarify, like I use the Walmart example. Like when I was a kid, Kmart was king. Like Kmart had the kingdom. And I often think about like, God, somebody's kicking themselves. Like, God, Walmart just kicked the crap out of us. Like, it's a style of business. And the reason, like, for some business owners, leading that is like perfect for them. For the right leaders, like that's exactly where they need to be. I think even Walmart though, like has to be to where they know what to say no to and what they say yes to. Like even though they have a very complicated low margin business, they still have that same focus of what we do and what we don't do. And I think that continually keeps them on top, and they continually can do difficult things. And I think the same is true for some business owners who pick more simple businesses that solve a very simple problem, whether it's coaching or horse training or a product in the market. Like you have to start with that same simplicity. And like if you want to grow it to be like this mega business, I think you take the same concepts with you.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I've never done it in practice, but I would agree with that from everyone I've seen that's ever done that. It's like, oh no, I'm really good at this. I think I could do this like times 10 the size I'm doing it, but it doesn't necessarily get more complicated.
Yeah.
It just gets bigger. Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's
You
so
hit,
interesting.
So
yeah,
Dan,
you hit it with the 10. 10x is easier than 2x.
Yes, sir. Yep.
And so to add to that, you were saying, kind of in the throes of your beef business, you started learning some stuff, and you were going to, or you attended at least a couple of classes for like business skills, management, financing, just ordering your life, your priorities, all that stuff. What turned you on to that?
Because we were failing horribly as business owners. Like we weren't ever really fulfilled in what we were doing. We were making crap for money. And like, the one thing I learned is it is totally true that you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes. And like all of us have to remind ourselves, like, if we truly want to do awesome stuff, like I heard somebody saying the other day, like people who truly do amazing things in the world are they're under fire. People like they're like, it's like the axe is always over their head. And like you get to where you like, for a lot of people, like to manage or to lead, that's what it means, is to fail and to be humble and to wake up every day and go like, how can I be a better person? How can I lead better? How, like, if I don't get this right, like my company's going to fail. Like if that doesn't excite you and give you passion, then you need to get out of it. And like, you don't do that kind of stuff. You do that because that's who you are. You don't do it because you want to be a billionaire. Like that's the one thing I learned from doing the guest ranch thing. I met so many multimillionaires, some of them that were truly happy in life and some of them that were totally miserable. And we were turning into the one that was totally miserable. And like, we were so deep in it, like we felt like we couldn't stop. We couldn't change. And so my wife was like, we gotta do something to educate ourselves. We gotta get out of this. There's gotta be more to it than this. And like, it really led to us like discovering, like, why in the hell do we own a meats business?
Oh, that's funny. So can you tell us where you went or who it was that helped you with that, or what class it was?
Yeah. This is the thing. This all started with the clinics. Like when I was around all the horseman clinics and all that, like I kind of knew, like I always had a hunger for learning. I could kind of sort out like, well, this clinician says to do it this way. And then this guy's like, it's the opposite. Like I could kind of sort it out. And as like I go on now, like all of these business programs that we did, like people lump them all together like, oh, they're all the same. That's all the same stuff. But it's really just about learning and getting a learning mindset. And like, that's the thing they all have in common. So like it started really with ranching for profit, which is way more like, just for conversation's sake, let's say we said there's business, there's entrepreneurialism, and then there's like, let's call it economics. Like entrepreneurialism is about like solving big problems. Business is about like, is like more like I'd say let me jump to finance. Finances is like, what's my margin? Like I sell this product, I make a 70% margin. That's your finance and your economics. And the business is somewhere in between. So like ranching for profit was kind of more on the like finance and economics, a little bit into the business. And that kind of sparked some, like a few books, like the E-Myth, which is, what is that? Michael Gerber. 7 Habits of Highly Effective Stephen Covey, I think is that one. And then they all kind of snowball. Like, and this, I'm going to draw this back to horsemanship because like, I'm embarrassed to say there was a point I thought Pat Pirelli was like, wow, he's an awesome horseman. And like, okay, wait a minute. Some people hate him. Some people like him, but it led to Ray Hunt and Buck Branham and people who I was like, nah, I really, really like this guy. This guy is really somebody who I want to be like. And a lot of the business books were like that for me. Is like the E-Myth led into Stephen Covey. And then like right now, I love like a lot of work by Patrick Lencioni, Alex Hermosi. And like I keep finding more and more. And like the important thing is to like keep finding, you mentioned it, Ben, when we were talking before, like build your bridge. So then as you meet these other people and you're growing and developing, like you're trying to align, like where do they fit in my bridge and where my focus and where I'm headed in life. And like, I'm continually finding new authors that like I get all jacked up and I can't sleep. I'm so excited. And they're more and more about like navigating drama and politics. And I realize like in business, to me, is really, I'm more on the entrepreneur side, is like really why businesses fail is the people. Like you can't agree anymore. There's like there's different phases. People get sick of it. People start arguing. The politics kick in. The turf wars start and the business sinks. And I absolutely love being in the middle of that stuff. And I never would have experienced that had I not experienced it in my own business. Working with restaurants and interns and hiring people and marketing companies. And like, after a while, like I kind of got like this scarcity mindset, like the world sucks. Everybody's terrible. Customers are idiots. Like I got such in a negative headspace. And like a lot of these business programs, probably the one that really turned the corner for us was Michael Hyatt and what was then Business Accelerator, which is now, most of their stuff goes through what they call Full Focus Planner. I get all jacked up. Is that on point of what you were asking?
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally get your example about Pat Pirelli. My big hero in the beginning was Monty Roberts, you know.
Oh yeah.
The original
totally.
con artist himself. But hey, I thought Monty was the guy, you know. And then that led to actually working with horses different, which worked for the first horse. And then the second one bit me on my shoulder. So then I was back, you know, looking for new trainers, and, you know, it snowballed. And next thing you know, I found Buck. And then, you know, this podcast has connected me, but it started with Monty, and Monty got me out there in the round pen trying to do join up, you know. And then when that didn't work, then I was on to the next thing. So that's a great example of not discounting. I guess if you get on the learning journey, it's not always the information that comes down. It's what you do with it. And if you just stop learning because you got some bad information, then you're a quitter, really. But if you take bad information and either learn something from it or use it to go find better information, then you're on track. You're still rolling.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's so much bad information, right? Like sometimes I'll get on like I gotta hand it to me. Like if it wasn't for like, Monty Roberts and Pat Pirelli, I probably wouldn't have dug into the horses that like it. They like I have to respect them for getting me on that journey. And like, and we're all people at the end of the day, right? And when we start saying like, oh, that guy's an idiot, he doesn't know, like you get into this cancerous mindset. And I find myself doing that now again. Like I've run into a lot of like as I've grown professionally, like well, where did you get your degree? Or what horseman did you work with? And like it's such a negative mindset. And like it's just like is it more important to stay in a learning mindset or to get a doctorate once and then never learn anything again for the rest of your career? And I think so many people get sucked into this, like you're going to learn something once and then that person is the absolute answer for the rest of your life. Like I don't think that's, I mean, so there's one person, and we've had this conversation and Ricky and I had this conversation, Jesus Christ. If Jesus Christ is the one person that if he doesn't say it, don't do it, then good for you. But the rest of us are just people.
Mm-hmm. I like that analogy quite a bit. Should you get the doctorate now or should you just keep learning forever? Because that applies to so many fields, right? Like someone who is so quote unquote accomplished, and then how easy is it to be like, well, I've climbed the mountain, I guess I'll just sit up here for 30 years now.
Yeah, I got to tell you, in my experience,
so
my experience with business and like really, like our meats business did not like we didn't sell it for tons of money. It was like, okay, let's just sink this puppy. And like it's so humbling. Like I have to remind myself for whatever the design is, like how many times do we truly set ourselves up to like just walk out the door and say like, okay, today is a new day and like I will humble myself to like, and like I feel like there's nothing more empowering than like completely like, okay, I don't know everything. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to go put myself in a completely foreign situation that I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm totally uncomfortable. And like what it does to our soul and to like reset and see who we are. And like, it's incredible, but it's scary as hell.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Were you going to say something, Joe?
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, Dan, like you were saying, with the meats business, you got more and more in this scarcity mindset. And could you just expound on that a little bit? Like what was that like? And then also what flipped? Like, how do you feel now?
I think there's two ways you can look at everything that happens to you. Is one, you can see everything like if there's not enough to go around for everyone, then everyone's in trouble. And we all get sucked into like this survival lizard brain, just gotta do what I gotta do to get by and protect my livelihood, my family, my ranch, whatever it is. And like you stop being able to zoom out and see the bigger picture. And like you start like seeing everything around you as like somebody's trying to take from you, or like if I'm right, then that means someone else is wrong. And that's all into this, like probably the better way to put it is like survival or thrive. And to truly thrive, like we weren't with where our business was. Like, we were not waking up every day, like financially or the how we were approaching our day. Like, this, I don't want to live like this. And like, you start seeing everybody is an idiot. Everybody's trying to take something from me. Why don't the customers get it? And then you totally remove the ability to see like what is possible.
So then what's the first thing that you have to change in order for that way of thinking to begin to swap, to swap out that scarcity mindset? Because I imagined you can't go out and control your neighbors or your employees or the market or your like there's a lot of things you really can't control, but it does make sense that the mindset would certainly help, and that would be a big part of the situation turning over and you getting out of that situation. So what's the first thing that you implement when you're in that vicious cycle, this self-licking ice cream cone of, desperation and destruction?
You have to stop or the world will stop you. Like, for some people, that's a health crisis. Some people, it's a divorce. Some people, it's bankruptcy. Like, we all will really charge down that path way farther than we should for years, 20, 30 years. Like, you really have to build a habit of like, stop. Like, and I think a lot of it comes from like one of the things my wife does, and it drives me nuts, I gotta say, but she started this thing at the end of the day. She's like, what are you grateful for? And I'm always like, I don't know, the same thing I said yesterday. It really, like, every day you got to build these habits of how you're going to approach the day. And that in itself is an entirely different conversation. But like, you have to build habits every day to stop and think about, what am I doing and why am I doing it? It's so easy to charge into a path of being somebody you're not, like careers like you hate. Like, I have to, like, I'd say 80% of the public gets sucked into that trap. And like you just have to build a habit to like stop and think about what you're doing, why you're doing it. Is this truly who I am and the life I want to live? And like, I realize like everybody has a version in their own life to where they end up on a path they didn't really mean to. And it's really just having the courage to say like, I got to redirect. And like, some of the friends I have now, I might have to let go. Some of the relationships that I have like might need to end. Those are tough choices. But until you let go of those, you can't latch on to something better.
Yeah, that's big. I think sometimes it's not even how you feel about your life that makes it hard to change, but it's what you think other people think about you that makes it hard for you to change.
Yeah. I think probably one of the most detrimental things that happens to us, and it starts when we're kids, is we start getting compared to the people around us. We start asking, like, people ask, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? How in the hell do you know? When you're in high school, how in the hell do you know who you are? There's no way anyone should be asking you what you want to be when you grow up. But it starts then. And we start comparing ourselves to our parents, our friends, our people around us, what other people have and we think we should have, or what we think we don't have. It all starts when we're kids. And it just continues into the rest of our lives and the people we're around. I do all the talking. I want to make sure.
I mean, I kind of no. Now I want to challenge you a little bit on that, Dan, because that makes sense. We shouldn't compare ourselves to other people, but we started this podcast with you talking about how you wanted to be Indiana Jones, and I think clearly that helped set the stage for your life. I mean, if you hadn't have told me that, and someone quizzed me right now and said, okay, who do you think Dan wanted to be when he was a kid? Like Indiana Jones would easily be on, my top 5 of, movie characters I thought he wanted to be like. So it's clearly shaped your life. I mean that as a compliment. Yeah. That's one of the coolest guys, in my opinion. For me, there's like a lot of old cowboys and stuff. I loved the cast of Bonanza. I don't even know which ones necessarily. Yeah. I just like those guys. And so I know that's definitely shaped, heck, the clothes I bought, the way I talked, who I wanted to be around, what state I lived in, what the scenery looked like. Yeah. And I think in a lot of ways, there were good things that came from that. So how do you separate that? Because we know kids need inspiration. We know kids need,
yes,
like, you don't want them to grow up in some Eastern Bloc apartment building, where there's nothing but like potatoes and cabbage and a red brick wall to look at. Like, I mean, I guess the absence of interesting things might cause like a real spike in imagination, but I just think that's a little bit stark. But I also understand how comparing like your kids to other kids are constantly saying, hey, you're this and he's that. Like, you think you can do that? And then your internal brain starts thinking you're not good enough, or you're always striving. Like, I know that's not good. So how would you balance that? Like having examples for kids, but not making them feel like they need to be compared to their heroes, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Well, I think that's just a part of like, okay, so for me, like I can remember when I thought Gus from Lonesome Dove, like was the guy, right? Like I want to be just like Gus. And I think to some, there's nothing wrong with having an ideal. There's nothing wrong with dreaming. But I think as we grow, like you take ideals and turn them into goals. Otherwise, you're always living in a dream world that doesn't really exist. And I feel like a perfect example of this right now is Facebook. Is everybody gets like, I shouldn't say kids, like adults, everybody, people get on Facebook and they compare their life to others they see on Facebook, and they start feeling bad about themselves because they're looking at this ideal that it's not real. Like right now, like there's all these gurus like join my program and you're going to be a millionaire in 6 months. Like that always sells. Like there's nothing wrong with having an ideal, but it can ruin you. Like you have to be able to step back and separate what is truly a goal and what is something that I need to put my mind to and achieve, and what's just an ideal that's like never going to happen, or like to some degree, like I've met some of my heroes and you get to know them and like it's disappointing because they become real and they do real things and they do things they shouldn't. And that like, it doesn't mean they're bad people. It doesn't mean I shouldn't inspire to learn from them and like them. Like, but like you just learn that like, you've got to separate real from like just this fake thing it's not there.
Yeah. I heard a really good way of putting what you were just describing the other day. Talking about comparison in society, right? It used to be about keeping up with the Joneses, right? Well, back in the day, you had to keep up with the Joneses, and the Joneses lived next door. Okay? So it was like, oh, you see the nice cars and you see the nice house and you're like, oh, we got to keep up with the Joneses. But you also got to see that like the mom and the daughter don't really get along over at the Joneses. And, the mother-in-law's cuckoo and whatever problems it was, because they were real. They were right there. Okay? And you might have still been jealous of them, but they were real and tangible. But now the Joneses are on Facebook. And all you get to look at is the Joneses highlight reel. Yeah. You don't get to see the messy life the Joneses live inside their McMansion.
Yeah. So
yeah,
I also
really
like to think about it too, is like somebody can be really good at one thing and give you really good advice and really help you in one way, but that doesn't mean they know everything about everything. Like somebody could be immensely valuable to you in business, and help you like make tons of money, but then they've been divorced 20 times. So it doesn't mean like they're suddenly a bad person and they're giving you bad information. It just means don't take marital advice from that guy. Like, and I feel like so many of us set so many people in our lives on a pedestal. And like the second they fail or become real, like we totally just ditch them and move on and like don't want anything they have to say. And I think so much of what we all need to do is stay in this abundance mindset to where we find reasons. There's a whole story, this story tied into my brain, I'll tell you in a minute, but like we find reasons to like each other and find the good in each other. And also when we run into people that do dumb things, like forgive them and move on. Like maybe I don't need you as much in my life, but it doesn't mean I need to call you a bad person and never talk to you. And I think we forget to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because we're all just trying to like hustle and grind and like be those millionaires, right? And then so like part of the way to do that is idealize somebody, and then it's like you said, if you put a human being on a pedestal, they will let you down.
Totally.
It's inevitable.
Yeah.
Yeah, guaranteed.
No, because it's not fair to you for putting them on a pedestal. It's not fair to them for being put on a pedestal. And then everyone just ends up being disappointed because you guys were the same. It's just maybe he knew more about this than you did, and so you were trying to get advice from him, which is what you should have done in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of brings us to Ranch Vision Achievement. When did that come about? Where did you get that name from? That's a good name.
So one of the big things like I got onto is I read a book called The 6 Working Geniuses. And going back to like this get to know yourself thing is they break it down into like the whole story. It's a really good story. Patrick Lencioni is the author, and it's kind of fictionalized story of how he came up with this. And it's basically is like successful guy doing pretty good, making a lot of money, kind of likes his job, but like more and more he'd wake up just cranky. And the joke at work, like owned his own company, his joke is work, like everybody would just walk around him and walking on eggshells around him because he was always on the edge of being pissed off, stressed out. And finally somebody goes up to him and they say, "What the hell's wrong with you?" And he's like, I don't know. Like I have everything that I feel like I should have, and like I'm just not happy, and I don't know why. And they started digging into it, and the whole book is about basically breaking down everybody's brain. Everybody's wired with certain strengths. And like we're all like to some degree there's something that like we can do and we can do it well, but it doesn't really inspire us. There's stuff that like we absolutely dread, but we feel like we have to do it to make money. And then there's the thing that like, man, am I good at this? And I this is my favorite thing in the whole world. And like in those 3 categories, like everybody's kind of wired like to have like 2 of these, what he calls 6 geniuses, and they're wonder, invention, discernment, galvanize, empowerment, and tenacity. And everybody is wired in a way to where they're good at 2 of them. And the rest of them fall into those other categories to where it's in their total drudgery zone and they dread 2 of them. And or like the ones in the middle are like, I can do it. And like, I kind of like it, but it's, I feel like, I don't know, kind of stuck in the middle. I could do something better. And so like the whole book was like figuring that out, and they started a consulting company. They would go into companies, and like most companies get stuck in like this middle zone to where like their own internal stuff, like they're just kind of like getting by, like they're not really launching into the next step. They're not really tanking, and they don't really know what to do about it. And they started going through people's executive teams, and then into their employees with this genius thing, and like trying to figure out what really like give people like knowledge into how they're wired, and be like, oh, well, why are you in this role? And they'd be like, well, I don't know, it pays good. I got a wife and kids, good benefits. And they're like, well, let's dig into this genius thing, and let's get you in a spot that really fits what you're doing. And like they would revolutionize these companies that were just stuck in like this mediocrity. And so like that like really resonated with me, because a lot of the ranches I've worked on, like the classic story is pissed off, stressed out ranch managers, owners disconnected, and like sell the ranch out from under the manager, and all the cowboys come and go, and I hate this place and I'm going somewhere else. It's like everywhere I worked had a version of this same mediocrity that everybody would just say, well, that's just how it is when you're work. And I was always, that's bullshit. Like, why? This can't be, there's got to be a better way than this. And a lot of the ranches that I worked on, like, would like experience like these seasons to where like things were really clicking and people really loved working there and people were really getting along, and then it would go back into this drudgery or mediocrity. People would quit, they'd start over again, things are great. And like I always just really loved being in the middle of that. And then as I worked at bigger and bigger ranches, worked with some other businesses, conservation organizations, bunch of marketing companies with our meat stuff, really opened my eyes to the bigger business world. Like I just really digging into the like the drama and like the politics and the silos within people's organizations. And like I could see the things they would want to do in their organization and for the land, for the ranch, and they can't do it. And they dig into like, oh, it's because our margins suck. We need more for our cows. Oh, it's because my brother's an idiot and he needs to give me more power in the ranch. Like it always comes back to this drama. And I absolutely love being in the middle of it and helping people navigate all that stuff. I went on a huge rant, sorry.
No, that was great. So what exactly do you do then with the ranch vision achievement? Is that basically everything you just described? You figured out how to package that and start going out and helping these ranches to achieve their vision? You there?
Yeah,
Can you hear us now,
I'm
Dan?
here. Yeah, I got you.
Okay. No worries. So my question was, that was a great rant, by the way. Nothing wrong with that. That model that you just kind of described, is that basically what you're doing with ranch vision achievement, is taking those principles and then going to these ranches and helping them implement that to get people in the right places to achieve their vision?
Yep. Yeah, it's the simplest way I've found so far to just, well, and everybody knows they need a vision and mission statement. Like everybody does it. And we all come up with this bullshit vision and mission, and that means nothing. And they all read the same way. But it's the best way that I found to get in front of people so far. And it's really what I do. What I do really is all about trying to build a business, about building a community of people, getting them into this abundance mindset, getting them into this, digging into what truly is holding them back from achieving their goals, whether it's business, personal, whatever it is in their organization. my latest quest is to try to find a way to dig into that with people, because everybody hides the drama and what's really going on. Everyone is terrified to talk about it, but it is what's holding back their whole life and their whole business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we're living in an interesting time where that kind of stuff is being discussed more openly, and the cat's kind of out of the bag. Even if people don't talk about themselves, they at least have the opportunity to listen to podcasts or read books or see videos where people are talking about it, so that way they can recognize, oh yeah, that's going on in my life too. And your example about ranch hands and ranch managers just thinking that everyone's dumb and stupid and this will never work. It's so accurate. I mean, a lot of the places I've worked around, people don't even wait for an example to tell you of why things are bad. It's just like the first night in the bunkhouse or the first time you stand around the water cooler. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, you're going to get to know what this guy's really like. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What did you just say? What do you mean? Oh, you'll understand. You'll know. Give it a week and let's talk again.
Yeah.
And like, you don't know how many times I've heard that. You've probably heard the same thing. Like day one, you get the thing from the guy who you kind of maybe are starting to have a friendship with, where you get off on the side and they go, yeah, you'll see what it's really like. And like, what a negative attitude, right? Like that is so negative. That's your first day, your first hour maybe. And they're already being like, hey, this is what you should expect. You will see that it's bad. And that's a very negative outlook.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, like, nobody wakes up in the morning and is like, I'm going to be an absolutely horrible person. I'm going to be the worst ranch manager ever. Like, nobody does that intentionally. And like that person, like so many people just don't tell someone else, like, dude, like, what's going on? Are you all right? Like, what? You seem stressed out every week. Like, people can't have difficult conversations. We're not taught to do it. We're taught to annoy, like, just act like it's not happening. And then when you become like that cranky, pissed off manager, no one tells you. And if they do, they scream at you before they leave. And like nobody, they're not told, like, dude, like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Have you ever read the book? You probably are familiar. How to win friends and influence people.
I've heard of it.
It's by, normally I always can think of that guy's name. I cannot. He has the same last name as one of those famous billionaires from New York. Carnegie. It's by Dale Carnegie. And great book. And that's one of those books, same kind of topic, same ideas you've been talking about, where it completely opens your mind to like the fact that you're not the only person in the world. And that for most of your life, your entire mindset has been like, what do I want? How can I get it? How can people treat me better? How can my life be? It's just all me, instead of like out of that entire book. I need to read it again, but out of that entire book, I would say like a short summary that I learned from it was wake up in the morning and go throughout your day and try to do something nice for every person that you interact with, no matter how small. Like that to me was the book. I mean, it's very complicated and there's a lot of examples and different psychological things it goes into. But like, to me, that was the gist of it, was like, you need to take your eyes and like look that way. You need to look out, because your life, is impacting everyone you meet and you're not even aware of how you're treating them. Yeah. But I found that book to be very, very impactful.
Yeah. Somebody told me I was reading a thing, I forget where it was, and they were, Mike Michalowicz is what I was reading. And he was talking about, like, we all end up in this segmented world to where we all, like, we don't really look at what we can achieve as a team. We don't really look at how we need to align with people around us to achieve amazing things. Like, we're not taught to do it. And he was saying a lot of it starts when we're kids. We're all taught to like sit here, memorize this, don't talk. You need to pass the test. Like we're not taught like to pass the test. It's 3 of you to come together to figure out the best solution. We're all taught to just like develop our own school, stay in our own little bubble. We're not taught to like work together as a collaboration. And like, I never really thought about that before. And I feel like so much of that happens on ranches. Like you end up with, like a lot of managers feel like they need to be the key to every door. They need to be the best at everything. They need to be the answer to everything. And they're not comfortable or learn how to like have people on their team or within their organization that can know more about something than they do. They feel insecure. They feel less. They feel like they're not in charge. They feel out of control. And like he was tying that all back. Like we're all taught that when we were kids.
So it stems from insecurities that you feel like you can't be a part of a bigger group to accomplish something. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest challenges I've seen in management and on ranches. And I mean, I've worked a bunch of horse barns. Like it's always somebody's vying for the top. Somebody wants to be the expert at everything. Everybody, like we're all taught to like, if you're the guy behind the scenes, like you're not important. Like you got to be in charge. You got to be the smartest guy in the room. And it's so false. It's such like this idealistic thing that like you don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. Like I feel like that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and one of the biggest things I try to bring to Ranch Vision Achievement is really going in an organization and just taking down these silos that they have everybody in. Like nobody really trusts like the cowboys to have a thought, or they don't trust that the owner has something to offer because they're some exec from New York and they don't know anything about ranching, and the ranch manager knows more. And you see these vicious silos and circles where people can't really come together and be humble and be like respectful of one another, and like without feeling like they're somehow stupid or not in control, or they need to know more than the other guy. And I feel like that's the biggest thing that holds most ranches back.
So, and we'll be getting close to wrapping this thing up pretty soon, but I got to ask you, like when you're attacking one of these problems, where do you start? Like, can you get all these people together in a room and just kind of say, hey, like, let's sing Kumbaya? Or are you going individually?
No,
where do you start when you come into a situation?
Like,
yeah. So where do you start when you start to tackle this group of people where you have the owner, the manager, and the workers? That's a lot of different people across the spectrum to be like, okay, we need to change the way things are being operated. We need to change the thought process here. Where do you start? Besides after the argument.
Yeah. So there's nothing more unifying than a crisis. Like just think about anytime you watch the news and like there's a hurricane and all these people coming together to help each other that they hated each other before. And like everybody lets shit go during a crisis and they find a way to help each other. There's nothing more powerful than a crisis. And so the trick to the whole thing is to try to get how do you get as close to that as possible without a crisis? Because sometimes when you get into crisis mode and you get into emotional, like people, you either break people or you get them across the line. And probably the best analogy that I've heard with this, one of an old friend of mine, he used to be an instructor at West Point. And he always used to say, you got to take them apart and then build them back up. You can't do one without the other. If you just take people down and don't build them up, you'll ruin them. you have to put them back together. But and it makes me think, like, the one thing with any organization, like, until you can get it to crisis mode and people will come out and say what they really think one way or another, you cannot move forward. You have to go there, and like sugarcoating it and not having difficult conversations is not going to get there. And the biggest fear that they're going to get pissed off and yell at you and say, what kind of crappy consultant are you? Get out of here. Like, you got to be brave enough and humble enough to go there. And surprisingly, like, most people, like another good analogy, I have a good guy who used to work for me, was in jiu-jitsu. And he said, Dan, there's nothing that makes you want to hug somebody more than a jiu-jitsu round. Like, you got to go there. You got to go there for people to like turn the corner, and they're ready to, like, they want to feel better. They want it to go well. Like, you got to go for the blow up as close as you can. And if you can do it without a knockdown screaming match, then great.
So then you go in and your strategy is to find that crisis.
You got to bring up,
because I mean, if someone hires you, it's probably like, if someone hires you, it's probably not, it could maybe not be going horrible, but they want to improve, right? And so there's obviously something where that you can bring to the forefront, and then that's your strategy, is get there and define it in very plain terms such that they feel that sense of urgency.
Yes. When you start asking the right questions, like, everybody will give you the fluffy vision and mission, and everybody gives you the standard, I want to make, well, how much money do you want to make? Well, as much as possible. Like, everybody gives you the same answers. And so, like, you got to keep asking. If you want a better answer, you got to ask a better question. And you start to notice after a while, certain people, like, won't let the other guy talk. You start to notice a lot of the dynamics of, like, somebody's always buffaloed. Somebody has a really good idea and hasn't said it for 20 years. Like, you start digging more and more and shining light in dark places, and you keep asking them, like, what is the win that we want? Like, another analogy that I really like is Alex Hormozy, gym guy. He's one of the really interesting business dude. Built a whole fortune off of building gyms. And he always comes back to the example, when somebody goes into a gym, like, they want to look good, they want to feel better, and like, they start balking. And you got to keep asking them, like, do you want to look better? Do you want to feel better? Do you like, and that, yes. Okay, well, then you got to do these reps. You got to keep coming. You got to find in these questions, like, what do you truly want? And then you'll start to notice, like, the things like, the most important thing you need to hear is what they won't say. And you got to keep digging at it. And people get, like, if they don't get emotional and you can't see them drawn into the conversation, you're not going to get there. If they keep holding it back, like, you can't bring it. You can't bring them to where they truly want to be and where they want to get their family. If it's a ranch, like, you really got to go into the stuff. Otherwise, it's never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Well, it's just like, I'm sure you're already aware of this, right? But maybe you're dealing with, like, an older horse that you're restarting or something. It's like, how you don't ever want to overface a horse, but how bad does this need to get before you're going to change your behavior? Yeah. Not that you're going to abuse an animal or anything like that, but like, how hard does the wrong thing need to be before you try just anything different. It might not even be the right thing, but just anything different, right?
Yeah. So I really like that you use the analogy of the old horse, because like this came up the other day. We were talking, I'll have to change the example a little bit. Otherwise you'll figure out, like, I'll spill the beans on who the client was. But let's say it's about cows. Let's say it's when I was talking about getting these group of cows to go up the mountain. Can you get these dull old Angus cows to be comfortable walking up that mountain, even though they've never done it? Yes, you can. It's going to take a stupid amount of patience and consistency and an open mindset and like hours and hours and hours and hours. Could you take a group of young heifers that don't know any different and get them to do it within a week? And they don't know, like, they don't have all that baggage. They don't have all that stuff. Totally. And they just, well, this is just how the world is. It's the same thing in business. Is like, we all kind of end up at a point to where we know what we know because all the crap that's happened to us, the people that have burned us, are what we've like, we all end up at a spot to where, can we all come back to achieving like this amazing thing? Yes, but you got 30 years of baggage to undo. Like, the best you can do is start today and start going the right direction. And then when you see that, like this happens to me, you see a 20-year-old entrepreneur who just like nabs technology, nabs opportunities, and they're a billionaire within like 3 years. And you're like, son of a, like, I start comparing myself like, oh my God, I got to step up my game. Like, and I start getting into things I shouldn't do. And I think we all have to accept where we're at in life. And like, the best place to be a better person and a better leader, a better business owner is right now. Like, and not just think about the inches that we need to wake up and do, not the miles that we need to achieve. And like, oh my God, I got 30 years of nonsense. If you do it one click at a time, like it, I don't care who you are, like everything you learn 1 inch at a time. You get fat 1 inch at a time, you get skinny 1 inch at a time. And I think it's the same in life and in business.
Yeah. Amen. That might be a good thought to end on, because I really like that. You do everything 1 inch at a time.
Absolutely.
I like Rocky Balboa says,
Dan, if people are interested, if they want to, one punch at a time.
There you go.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you or look up your stuff, what's the best way for people to do that?
So Ranch Vision Achievement is my website. Yep. That's the best way. And then I've got an online community I just started that you can find on there. That's
okay. All righty. Well, I'm sure some people will find this pretty interesting. I know we have a following of at least a dozen or so folks that listen to this podcast. So, best of luck with all that. Thanks for doing this. This has been a lot of fun. And we're going to go ahead and hang up the recording, but don't go anywhere because this thing will have to upload and we'll give you some instructions.
Okay.